in connection to land, water and culture, and to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. We'll begin the meeting. Membership is as listed in the agenda, but we do have apologies from Councillor Gaetano Greco. Can I just check, CEO? I don't believe we have other apologies. Is that no? Yes, thank you. Councillors, does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare this evening? There are none. So we'll move to confirmation of the minutes of the previous Planning Committee meeting. That's moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Lesurf. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Thank you. So that brings us straight to consideration of reports, and we have one on the agenda tonight for 7 Unison Avenue. I'll hand over to the officers to talk us through this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. This relates to the construction of a dwelling at 7 Unison Avenue, Northcote. The subject site's located on the southern side of Unison Avenue, to the west of St George's Road and to the east of the Mary Creek. The subject site is one of 7 lots which form 7 Euston Avenue. Lots 14, 15 and 16 already benefit from planning permission, which allow the construction of a double-storey dwelling on each of those lots, and the application seeks construction of a very similar 2-storey dwelling which integrates with the already approved dwellings in terms of form and design. Lots 18, 19 and 20 to the west of the site are undeveloped and no permit applications have been received for these lots to date. The proposal involves the construction of a new 2-storey dwelling with 3 bedrooms, private open space at ground level and via a balcony at the first floor. A single car space is provided in a garage to the rear with access from the right-of-way. Above the garage is a workshop with a full bathroom. The appearance is contemporary and high-quality materials are utilised, including recycled red brick, black and grey brick, charred timber battens and metal finishes. The site's located in the Neighbourhood Residential Zone, Schedule 1, and is affected by the Development Contributions Plan Overlay and Environmental Significance Overlay. Planning considerations primarily relate to neighbourhood character, res code, the environmental significance overlay given the site's proximity to the Mary Creek and car parking. 13 objections were initially received to the application and 1 further objection was received last Friday after this committee report was published. So there are a total of 14 objections and the 1 objection has been circulated today to the councillors. The late objection didn't, however, raise any new issues that haven't already been considered in the planning assessment. The objections are comprehensively summarised and resolved in the report. And the report outlines compliance with neighbourhood character and res code considerations subject to the included conditions. The assessment also considers the previously approved dwellings to the east and the VCAT decision for lot 14. Reduction of the car parking requirement of 1 space is justified in the report. This is through the provision and review of a car parking demand assessment and noting the site's excellent proximity to public transport and other active transport options. In terms of the environmental significance overlay, a planning permit is required to remove trees and for any site works. Following the approval of the 3 dwellings to the east, the developer removed a number of trees from the wider site. Also without planning permission, the addition of fill had been undertaken across some of the wider site. In regards to this, it's noted that enforcement proceedings are being pursued separately to this application at the Magistrates Court. And in terms of this application, it does seek retrospective permission for the removal of these trees from the subject site, and an appropriate arborist report has been submitted with the application. Council's arborist has considered the retrospective tree removal and agrees with the removal subject to appropriate replacement planting, which is covered by a permit condition. In regards to the fill on the site, Melbourne Water has been consulted and no particular concerns have been raised in regards to the extent proposed. A condition does, however, require an environmental management plan prepared to maintain the site and protect the creek environments. In regards to the creek interface, this is assessed in the report and is acceptable given an appropriate setback from the creek and suitable vegetation on the land to the west of the site. It's noted that Melbourne Water was informally consulted and no objections were raised to the development on this particular site. A condition does require some new external materials and colours finishes for the development to further improve the appearance and interface of the building to the creekside environments. As such, the application's been assessed as supportable, subject to the included conditions. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Now we have the applicant listed to speak as well as two objectors. I'll call first on the applicant. That's Mr. Charles Sousa Pillai. Please come up. You have 5 minutes to address the Planning Committee. Come up to the table and we'll use the microphone so that people who are watching on live stream are able to hear. Thank you.
Dear councillors, thank you for your time. I'm Charles Sousa Pillai and I'm the owner of 7 Ewanson Avenue, Northcote. I'm a Darebin resident of 30 years and a local small business owner. I would like to address and give context to two recurring arguments for objections. The first being the removal of trees. I'm accused of illegally cutting down trees. I did not. I have forwarded supporting documents for your consideration via email. In my application for demolition, I applied for and was given consent to demolish the existing dwelling and clear the site, including trees. In my application, I provided an arborist report and a site plan that clearly marked the dwelling and the surrounding vegetation. I acted on council's consent. It is my understanding that council is a unified body that makes decisions after consulting all relevant departments. I am being tried not for a lack of seeking permission, but for receiving it from the wrong department. It is absurd and I will fight these charges vehemently. The second concern is Melbourne Water's comments. Melbourne Water's comments that it is unlikely to support further development on lot 18 to 20 because they do not meet setback requirements of 30 metres is premature and out of context. Precedents already exist in the area from relevant developments at both 1 and 2B Elizabeth Street. Both are on LSIO land and are imposed setbacks of only 5 metres. Supporting documents were forwarded to you all. The building envelopes for the remaining lots at Ewanson Avenue are not within the LSIO and are set back up to 25 metres from the creek. It is also well above the flood levels indicated by Melbourne Water. Without reviewing any survey data, precedents and/or proposed plans, the planner at Melbourne Water has made comments that are unsubstantiated. We are currently in consultation with management to have them review and rescind this statement. The majority of the issues raised by the objectors are not relevant to this application or are now in a legal matter outside the parameters on which the current application should be judged. This application is identical to the 3 previous applications that have been endorsed. A review of all relevant planning parameters have been assessed and approved by Town Planning and VCAT. I urge you to focus solely on the merits of the application in front of you. I have been labelled a rogue, asked to go back to where I come from, and had slanderous things said about me by the local community to council and businesses. It is appalling. I had intended on moving into lots 18 to 20 with my family. However, I'm selling because of financial hardship of holding the site and harassment from the neighbours. It is a far cry from the inclusive community that Darebin prides itself on. Your decision will have a significant impact on my family and me. So again, I ask you to consider the facts relevant to the application in front of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sousa Pillai. I'll now call on the objectors. Ms. Jane Ward and David Gelman listed together, and also Raina Matthews. Can I just check how many people are actually going to speak so that I can work out how to see? Okay, thank you. So, David, you'll have 2.5 minutes, and then...
Sorry, I'm Raina Matthews.
Raina, sorry,
yeah.
Apologies.
And David also can't make it.
David also can't make it. Okay, so is there anyone else who wants to speak? No, so that makes it simple, Raina. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Raina Matthews. I live next door to the proposed development, and I'm one of a number of local residents who are extremely concerned with the impact that the proposed building will have on the neighbourhood. and on the aesthetic and environmental quality of our section of the Merri Creek. A particular concern for the purposes of this meeting today is that there are a number of material, factual errors in the application, notwithstanding that it's certified as true and correct. Some of those errors are contained in the documents which are before you today, and it's not clear to me why they haven't been corrected prior to this time. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go through all of those, but I'd like to draw your attention to just a couple. First, can I draw your attention to the plan which is stamped as document 4 of 9, page 4 of 18, which is a plan of the site as it exists. There's an annotation on the plan which says that elements highlighted in red have been removed within the last 12 months, which is referring to the trees. Lot 17 sits in the middle of the plan, and there are 4 trees shown on the lot which are marked as having been removed in the last 12 months. But in fact, this is not the case. The tree closest to the street has not been removed. It's a mature silky oak. That's a prominent feature of Unson Avenue. The applicant directed his demolition crew to remove the tree, but they were prevented from doing so by the intervention of myself and other local residents and the subsequent attendance of the council's compliance officer. The error in the plan is significant. The planner's report, which appears in the agenda, states that in numerous instances that all trees have been removed from lot 17. For example, at page 20, it stated the subject site is currently vacant, and as such, any permission for removal of vegetation would be retrospective. You're being told that removal of trees from lot 17 is a foregone conclusion because it's already occurred, when in actual fact, the largest tree on the site has not yet been removed. The understanding that the block is vacant has apparently also led to other errors. For example, the satellite image of the property, which appears at the front of the set of documents before you, purports to show lot 17, but in fact shows lot 16, because lot 16 has been cleared of all vegetation, whereas lot 17 has the large silky oak at its front. Accurate identification of the site is critical to properly addressing the impact of a proposed development. If the site has been misidentified, then that brings into question a whole lot of other conclusions in the report that's before you. There's another particular issue I want to focus your attention on, which is that for a car to be reversed out of the rear of the garage, out of the garage at the rear of lot 17, a laneway will need to be constructed to allow that reversal out of the garage. There is no space for that laneway without it extending over the escarpment of the Merri Creek. The development guidelines for the Merri Creek say that development should be set back 12 metres from the escarpment, but if the garage is to be accessible and usable, then it will require construction of a roadway extending over the escarpment. The road will need to be constructed well above the grade, which will require construction of some kind of retaining wall. And there'll also need to be substantial barriers to stop cars from reversing over the edge of the escarpment and literally rolling down the hill and into the creek.
30 seconds.
There are a lot of people who use and value and care about the Merri Creek, and the restoration of habitat along the creek over the past 2 decades has been nothing short of extraordinary. And I know that I speak for a lot of local residents in urging you to follow the clear recommendation of the Merri Creek Management Committee, which is that this application be rejected. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr Matthews. You may resume your seat. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor McCarthy.
If I can just get an officer response in relation to the comment by the objector just now. regarding the access to lot 17 via the laneway. If we can just understand the officer assessment.
Yep, it's definitely a condition on the permit that the laneway needs to be constructed. And our transport team and engineering team haven't raised any objections to that. I don't think it's a safety issue if it's constructed properly.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lasserve?
Could we get a response from the officers around the whether this parcel of land is vacant or not, or whether there is any trees existing on it, and also a comment regarding I think it was the silky oak, the large tree that remained.
Thank you, Councillor Lasserve. Over to you.
In regards to that, yeah, there is an arborist report. Some of the trees have been removed. There is still some on there. Our arborists haven't objected to the removal of what's left, and that's outlined in the arborist report. They're either not native or not considered, necessary to retain, and that's from our professional people.
Thank you.
There might be disagreements between, others.
Any further questions, councillors? If not, does anyone have a motion? Councillor McCarthy.
I have a motion to refuse the application. I'll ask the councillors to bear with me because it is quite long. The motion reads...
We may be able to get it on screen, Councillor
okay?
McCarthy.
That might save me.
That might save reading it.
Yep. Sorry, what's that? It is long. I can just quickly skip through it if it's... No?
By all means, perhaps without reading each clause individually.
Sure.
Yep.
So the motion is that Planning Committee refuse the application with grounds as follows. 1, the proposal is inconsistent with clause 12.06-1S, environmentally sensitive areas, and 12.05, 1S, I should say, and 12.05, 2S, landscapes. Extensive tree removal and works will have unacceptable impacts on the significant and environmentally sensitive area and the adjacent Mary Creek corridor. 2, the proposal is inconsistent with clause 42.02-1S, catchment planning and management, and the clauses are there for councillors to read. The proposal requires removal of vegetation and works to allow for construction of the dwelling. The dwelling encroaches into the 30-metre buffer zone of the Mary Creek and will negatively impact on the water quality of the Mary Creek and associated water catchments. 3, the proposal does not comply with the purposes and clauses of Clause 42.01 Environmental Significance Overlay, Schedule 1 Mary Creek and Environs as follows. A, the removal of vegetation, works and development of the site will result in unacceptable impacts on significant plant/animal species. B, the height, bulk and appearance of the proposed building will negatively impact on the environmental values and visual character of the creek. C, insufficient landscaping is provided to allow screening of the development to the Mary Creek corridor. And D, removal of vegetation and works will impact upon the health and water quality of the creek. 4, the proposal is inconsistent with the goals of the Mary Creek and Environs Strategy 2009 to 2014. 5, the proposed development presents a sheer double-storey wall to the western creekside interface and does not comply with the objectives and standards of the development guidelines for the Mary Creek Management Committee. In particular, the proposal does not comply with standards 03-1 landform, 04-1 building height and setback, and 04-2 building interface. 6, the proposal does not meet the objectives of clause 54 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, particularly A, clause 54.03-3, A5 site coverage. The proposed site coverage exceeds the requirements of the standard. B, clause 54.03-6, A8, significant trees. A number of existing trees have been removed to accommodate the development. C, clause 54.04-2, A11, walls on boundaries. The western wall on boundary as it presents to the Mary Creek corridor, notably the excessive length and overall height of the sheer double-storey form, will result in an unacceptable interface to the creekside environment. D, clause 54.05-3, A18, solar access to open space. Insufficient setbacks are provided to the secluded private open space areas at ground floor to allow acceptable solar access for the amenity of future residents. 7, the proposal detracts from the natural qualities of the surrounding creekside environment. And 8, the proposal is contrary to proper and orderly planning.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lasserf, thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your patience in getting through that. I think it is important to state the reasons for refusal, and I don't think we arrive at this position lightly or without a strong case, in my view, for why we should refuse this application. I'm not going to touch on the other matters that were referred to by the applicant. They are matters in another jurisdiction, and I'm going to focus purely on the application ahead of us. I would express some concern by some of the comments of the applicant about statements that may or may not have been made that are of a discriminatory and racist nature, and I condemn any such statement in that basis, and I'm sure that the rest of the council stands with me if those statements have been made, and I think that's important for us to state that from the outset. Putting those things aside, those are not matters upon which we are deciding the application here tonight. The grounds upon which we are deciding is actually the appropriateness of the application in the context of both the planning scheme, other supportive documents, in this case, obviously the Merri Creek and Environment Strategy, the policy settings that we have, and of course, planning policy and practice more generally. And as councillors, hopefully you'll agree that there are sufficient and significant grounds upon which to refuse this application. I would express, obviously, a strong concern about the interface with the Merri Creek as probably the priority issue in this case. There are other issues, but as you would see from the grounds of refusal, there is not the sympathetic interface that I think we would expect to see, and which our planning scheme certainly would say is necessary as well in this case. Some of the technical matters that are before us, councillors, I think are easily defensible in another forum, and I think that if that's where it ends up, I think we have very strong reason to refuse this and to take our position. That's not to say that there should never be any development on that site. That's not what's before us at the moment. The question is whether this application meets the test, and on the basis of what we have before us, the evidence that's been provided by both the applicant and objectors, I would stand by this proposed refusal, and I ask councillors to support that refusal as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lasserf.
I don't have much more to add because I think Councillor McCarthy has summarised my concerns. My concern is also for the Merri Creek and its catchment. It is a sensitive interface, and I think that we need to make sure that any development that happens so close to that environment needs to be done carefully and making sure that we meet the objectives that we've set for ourselves for that site. I think in terms of not only in terms of the landscaping and those sorts of things, I think that the western, I think it's the western wall, is a significant harsh interface that there will be, if there is proposed future development, obviously will have an impact on that interface. But if that is, I guess, the site boundary, I also have concerns about that and the impact it would have on the visual landscape of the Merri Creek. And there are a number of other things that were raised in the alternate motion, which I won't go through, but I just wanted to reiterate my concerns in relation to this permit, this application and the creek.
Thank you, Councillor Lasserf. Councillors, are there any further speakers? Councillor Amir.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Thank you to the applicant and objector who took time to come here tonight and speak with us. And like Councillor McCarthy, I'm very happy to put aside the issue of the tree removal. It's not relevant for me for the issue at hand. And I'm also very sorry to hear about the experience of racism, and that's a really awful thing to happen, and it's pretty disgusting, to be frank. That said, I will be supporting this motion for two reasons. Firstly is around the impact on the creek, the risk to erosion, the visual impact for creek users, the loss of habitat, and impact on natural bushland. We put a lot of work into protecting our green open spaces. We don't have a lot of bush in the south and central parts of Darebin, and so we have to do whatever we can to look after what we've got. We know there are endangered species there. We know that that area is very much valued by the residents both in Darebin and Moreland who use the creek to walk, to cycle, to play. The community value is very high, and to me it seems inconsistent to be not considering that in our decision tonight. Secondly, as has been mentioned by Councillor McCarthy and LeSurf, the blank wall facing the creek suggests that the prioritisation of that, there hasn't been a prioritisation of that interface between the dwelling and the creek itself, and I understand that there are plans to have an additional development next door. To be really blunt, that's not going to win me over because I don't want any further development next door. For me, looking after the creek is more important than the individual value of that property, and the design of doing one at a time, I feel like has missed out on some opportunities to have something that
Thank you, that's
could
time.
have better housing outcomes.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Are there any further speakers? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. The Planning Committee has decided to refuse the permit. The decision can be appealed to VCAT. The applicant can appeal against this decision and has 60 days to do so. Should an appeal be lodged, every objector will be notified by VCAT. Notices detailing the decision tonight and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant in the next week. Thank you, councillors. That's the end of reports. The only other business is the general planning information scheduled VCAT applications. That's moved by Councillor LeSurf and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? Those are noted. Thank you. Consideration of reports considered confidential. There are none. So that brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you to all members of the public for coming along to the meeting tonight.